Mr. Assistant, Mr. Attorney or Attorney General. You are.
You're so positive.
Whole new career. Just good morning. This is Ed Hammer. This is the Attorney General. I represent the State Board of Land Commissioners. This morning, the board has been in executive session to discuss the matters related to Dow Junction development annexation, authorized for executive session under 246402(3)(a)(1) of the Colorado Revised Statute. The discussions were limited to authorized communications, and no decisions or actions were taken in executive session. The board is now on the record. Proceed with its regular agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Appreciate that. We do have 4 of our county commissioners present in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. Commissioner Chavez is joining virtually as part of this meeting as well. I want to thank the staff who put together our tour yesterday of the Williams Park Ranch. It was amazing. I told Bill, wanted to talk to tours I've had in my tenure on the board. Just such a beautiful place. You did so well in the logistics. I know that supported that work. Quite an undertaking, so thank you. And we did have a meeting with several folks from surrounding counties that Director Ryan also alluded to. And we appreciate their attendance. It's a chance for us to hear from leadership here in this region and their questions, concerns, and our willingness to help partner where we can. And it was a really terrific conversation. So with that, we will move on to our full meeting agenda. I do want to note that we did receive a couple of online comments. So those will be entered into the record for this meeting as well. So know that with that, I believe we are ready to open Nick with any public comments not related to an agenda item today.
Well characterized. Folks listening along, if you'd like to make a comment to the board about an item not on the published agenda today, use the raise hand feature and we'll bring you to the floor so that you can address the board directly. I'm not seeing any raised hands.
We'll turn it over to Director Ryan.
Can I make a comment? Or?
Yes,
Sure.
that's your public.
I'll stand up so everybody can see me. I just wanted to introduce myself. I met you as a county treasurer, but I also am a leasee of the State Land Stewardship Trust. We are the 3rd generation on our working cow ranch in Routt County to lease. I work the ranch with my husband, my brother-in-law, his wife, and together we have 6 daughters. Our lease started out, I think my husband's grandfather was one of the first leases of a state land lease, and our first lease was a 50-year land lease. And over the period of time, our lease has shrunk in size. And now we have our 5th generation coming forward. I think our lease is up for renewal in 2025. I think we're looking at a 5-year lease or a 10-year lease. And I just want to express one of the reasons why agriculture ranches are not being passed down to the 2nd generation is this sense of the unknown, like the unknown if they can make it, or the unknown of if the parents can even pass the ranch down to the next generation. And we're kind of struggling with that in our family right now. We run about 2,000 head of Angus yearlings on the ranch. And we also have our recreation lease where we have a tourism business that benefits the city of Steamboat Springs. We offer ranch tours, agriculture tours, where we invite the public out to the ranch to teach them about our heritage in agriculture by snowmobile tours. We do cattle drives, horseback rides, and we also have a sledding hill. And so with that business, we would be able to pass down our ranch to the next generation. However, our state land lease, which makes up about 5,000 acres of our total 8,300 acres, is crucial to that operation. And without that, we cannot function. Our 5th generation would not be able to live in this community we would probably be able to be forced to sell out and move somewhere else. And so I just want to express to you that, but also I feel like you guys will get pressure, especially in Round County, on those recreation leases. We talked about the gravel bike race earlier. That brings in about $6.5 million in revenue. If they were to go after our recreational leases on our property, it would take our business away, but it would be ugly for our land stewardship. And so I want to, I guess, encourage you as you move forward, when you have a leasee who's running an active operation and also holding that recreation permit, just how valuable that relationship is, and that there will be no other person who is as good steward of the land as the person who is working it and also leasing it. It's a beneficial situation. And so I encourage you to always look at that going forward. And if there was any way that our lease, I think we have a special lease, it's a land trust stewardship lease, which is different than a lot of the leases. When we come up for renewal next year, if there's any discussion that we can have about extending that lease back up, when we had the 50-year land lease, 3 generations were able to operate our land with that 50-year land lease. There was a surety that each generation could make it. I can't give that to my kids because in 10 years, I'm not sure that they're going to be able to make it here. So if we could extend our land lease to 20 years or more, I can now tell my daughter who just graduated high school, yes, go to school, come back, you can take over. But right now it's kind of like, I don't know. I mean, you might be able to, you might not. You might be better going somewhere else. And those are hard realizations that we're having right now. But I also want to let you know that my niece is now the new agriculture teacher in South Route. And so we are talking about really exciting things with our school district. And we've invited the school district out in prior years to do range management studies, livestock evaluation, and the partnership that we have with our school and the state land that is offering that to those kids is incredible. And my daughters are on the state livestock judging team, and they just won the state of Colorado. And now we will go to nationals and represent that. And that is because you guys have given us that opportunity to raise our kids that way. So thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bill,
Yes,
can I give background?
why don't we wait until the matter comes before us in public comment? We generally don't go respond to public comment.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. So noted, Jim. All right, Director Ryan.
It's actually gonna be Kelly, given the DNR report. So I went and sat here too quickly. Oh, you wanted announcements? I'm sorry, I don't have any announcements that I won't cover in the staff report.
All right, we will move on to the DNR report.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. So we all met yesterday on the tour, but I will formally introduce myself, Kelly Romero-Heaney. I've recently been made the Deputy Policy Director for the Department of Natural Resources. It's a new position that was created in the Executive Director's Office. I formerly was the Assistant Director of Water, also had a dotted line to the Governor's policy team as Governor Polis's Water Policy Advisor. I did that for 3 years. And kind of uniquely, I actually live here in Routt County. So what a treat is it for me to have the State Land Board come to me. I don't have to drive 3 or 6 or 8 hours to go to a meeting. And so, you know, it's really great to have you here. It's really great to be out in the field to see the Williams Park parcel. You know, I'm somewhat familiar with that area. So thank you so much for including me in that. It's funny, I had such a state land boardy day. I think I was telling one of the commissioners that I, you know, I got to go on the tour with you all. I had to rush back to go pick up my child who attends a camp that's held at a school that was supported with best funds. And of course, then my teenager and my husband raced mountain bikes on the backside of Emerald Mountain, which of course was a part of the large land exchange. So anyway, the state land board and its operations impacts my personal life, and I've been a beneficiary of that in many ways. So how excited am I to have the opportunity to work with the state land board staff and you all to really support the work, the great work that you all do. So I'm thrilled to be in this. Oh, thank you. I also really appreciate you all including Nate Pearson, our new Assistant Director of Water, in your last meeting out in the Republican River Basin. It sounds like that was a really good informational session. DNR's been really involved in trying to help address some of the groundwater conservation issues out there, and Nate has been integral in that, even prior, of course, to him taking on the assistant director role. A couple of other staffing updates I just wanted to make sure you all were aware of. I don't know if you have worked with Stacy Quinn, DNR's tribal liaison. We have promoted her to assistant director. So that'll hopefully really help to kind of strengthen her role and hopefully keep her around for a while, because she's been amazing catalyzing, I think, for the relationships that we're building, and it's just the beginning. Also, just a heads up, Aaron Ray, our Assistant Director of Energy and Innovation, I know you all get to work with him quite a bit. So he will be stepping in as Acting Director of ECMC starting next week. So I'm only slightly panicking because I'm going to have to backfill for him in his to a degree in his role with EDO. But he will be filling in for Director Julie Murphy while she's on leave. She should be back in November. So excited, great opportunity for Aaron, still a resource for you all. Just know that I'll probably be stepping into some of the energy policy issues more than I ordinarily would be during that time. Speaking of energy and ECMC, just a few updates. I know Nate provided these last time, but I just to keep them on the radar, because I really think it impacts state land board business. ECMC's deep geothermal rulemaking is scheduled for August 5th through 9th. The draft rules are out and available for public comment on ECMC's website. Also note that the geothermal resource assessment was released on July 1st. So keep an eye on that. Also, ECMC is working on regulations for carbon sequestration. They're anticipating that rulemaking in fall of 2024. And our hope is that rulemaking will facilitate the state's subsequent application to the US EPA for primacy over Class 6 injection wells. Let's see, we'll be holding a series of public stakeholder meetings the week of July 15th, so next week, to take feedback on the future of carbon management in Colorado. So I presume this is an area that could potentially impact state.
In fact, commented on earlier drafts, these things have been really involved. Julie's been great with working with Ben and Crystal on our team, so.
Excellent. Well, we certainly value state land board's feedback on that and need it. Also, ECMC will be holding a cumulative impacts rulemaking in September. That rulemaking will incorporate the new definition of cumulative impacts created in House Bill 1346. And then also ECMC and CPW are in the process of implementing Senate Bill 12. You heard Routt County Commissioner Macy's talking about that. This is that renewable siting bill that will provide additional resources to local governments, tribal governments, and developers to inform development of renewable energy projects. ECMC and CPW will be hiring dedicated staff this summer to provide additional capacity related to renewable energy development. And then finally, sorry, a lot on the energy front, ECMC is planning a produced water rulemaking for late fall in 2024. This rulemaking was directed by House Bill 23-1242 and will establish goals to reduce freshwater use and increase the recycling and use of produced water in oil and gas operations. So I imagine that there will be lots of interesting discussion around that. I'll pause and see if there's any questions or comments on my energy updates. Okay, run through the rest of these quickly. I know you guys have a long day ahead still. Just a couple federal policy updates. BLM published their final Gunnison sage grouse, RMPA and EIS. I think, I don't know if State Land Board provided comments on that. I think so, but that's been going on for a while. That's been published. And just a heads up that the U.S. Forest Service has adopted several new categorical exclusions related to telecommunications, EV chargers, and fiber optic cables. If you have any questions on this or federal affairs, happy to connect you with my federal affairs policy advisor, Lacey Gentry. Transitioning to water updates. I'm not sure if you all were following the Rio Grande case, the Texas versus New Mexico settlement agreement in the Rio Grande. I know State Land Board has assets in the San Luis Valley, so could potentially impact you all. This was a case, there was a dispute around compact allocations relating to the 1938 Rio Grande compact. Colorado, of course, is a party to that compact. We weren't party to the, well, we weren't implicated in the case, but we were a party to the case because we wanted to make sure we were monitoring it to ensure that it was settled in a way that did not injure Colorado's interest. Texas, New Mexico, came to agreement, all was good. The United States objected. It made it all the way to Supreme Court. Of course, our Attorney General's office went to DC, Texas, New Mexico, they were there, argued before the Supreme Court. We were hopeful that we would prevail in our position that the US government cannot object to a settlement amongst the states on the compact. We were surprised by the decision. It was a 5-4 decision. The Supreme Court ruled in the favor of the US. And so the department is working really closely with the Attorney General's office just to really understand the implications of that decision, not just for our water users in the Rio Grande Basin, which includes the State Land Board, but also to understand the implications of such a decision for our 9 interstate compacts, including the Colorado. We're hoping that the decision is narrow enough that we keep it contained. We'll just leave it at that. Although I know this is all public, but I'll say perhaps Arizona and California would prefer that not be contained based upon some things that they've already published. So also speaking of Colorado River updates, Senator Hickenlooper introduced federal legislation recently that would reauthorize the System Conservation Pilot Program through 2026. And of course you heard your water expert, Justin Beery, talking about that yesterday, that there is some potential opportunities for any water right holder on the West Slope to enroll in that SCPP program. I will say that this, there's been some bumps and lessons learned with how SCPP has been rolled out in the last couple of years. Our staff at the Colorado Water Conservation Board are working with a consultant on the lessons learned so that we can help shape that program going forward. And then one other final thing I just want to note, since you all were in Northeast Colorado, probably heard a little bit about the Perkins County Canal. I know Assistant Director Nate Pearson provided an update on this. There really hasn't been much movement other than there's been just some changes in Nebraska. Sounds like Nebraska's DNR will be done August 2nd. And then also Nebraska's unicameral legislature did call for a special session to work out property taxes. Sounds like they're having some budget issues. And so just in a news article, it was referenced the Perkins County Canal appropriation, which is fairly significant, is being looked at. Any questions on water?
How many questions on water?
Well, we're gonna let you keep going.
Okay. And then on the Colorado Parks and Wildlife front, we're excited. CPW will be hiring 5 additional permanent staff to scale up work on invertebrates. And these staff will include a pollinator coordinator, a rare plant coordinator, aquatic invertebrate coordinator, and then 2 field level invertebrate biologists. And so we expect these staff members to help better assess population status and trends of invertebrate species, as well as conservation actions that can be taken. And then this past spring, CPW staff stood up a new beaver management working group. It's interesting because like beavers have been a huge topic in Colorado in a lot of, especially in water conversations. And so I think, you know, there's a lot of interest in figuring out ways to restore beaver populations on the landscape while also minimizing those like human wildlife conflicts, whether it be with water impacts or like infrastructure impacts. And so while CPW is working through that on their level, our goal is to then work on a DNR level. So I'll help bring together CPW, hopefully State Land Board will be willing to participate as well on the interagency working group, CWCB, Department of Ag, CDOT, bring everybody together, make sure that we have a really good strategy to restore beaver without frustrating all of our landowners. And then CPW is also working in coordination with the governor's office, GOCO, and of course DNR staff to roll out the draft of our Colorado outdoor strategy to a wide range of stakeholders for feedback and edits. And I really wanted to emphasize the importance of this strategy, given the topics that we heard across the 4 counties with respect to the impacts of recreation on our landscapes, on communities, and our hope is that this Colorado outdoor strategy will really like set the stage for figuring out ways to address those impacts, but to also you know, provide for good recreation in the state of Colorado.
Did you see this bill?
Yes.
It's online.
Yeah, happy to get the,
Dave's got it.
however,
That's what I can say.
excellent, perfect. Yeah, and we certainly, like, we want to hear from you all, want to hear feedback. And then I just, you know, based upon some of the conversation that we heard earlier, I just wanted to flag on the North Sand Hills discussion. You know, DNR's been actively having these conversations with the BLM on a management solution, and it's prioritized for us as one of the top statewide rec management issues that we want to help our partners tackle. So just know that DNR is at the table of those discussions.
Last year, when we were up there, they talked about, you know, being unsafe. Big issue for the community. That's like it still is in real life.
Yeah. So we're excited to like start what we are having these conversations, working on that. It is nice having Doug Vilsack in his role. He was, you know, formerly my colleague as assistant director of wildlife. I know you all got to work with him quite a bit. So it's nice to have the opportunity to work with him on that. All right, that was a mouthful. That's it for me. I'd love to answer questions or anything in topics.
I have a question. And
Yeah.
what are you being told in light of the Chevron decision about regulation at the federal level for like EPA and all the other communities with whom you work?
Yeah, that is a great question. Nothing, like I'm not being told anything. I'm trying to understand it in my role as deputy policy director to understand what the implications are for all that we do across our divisions. I know that the governor's office and legal staff are really working to analyze this as well. But I welcome your thoughts as well, just to really understand what this means for us.
We're gonna know for several years until there's precedent being set.
When was it supposed to be implemented? Perhaps that you can, as a non-lawyer, I don't know, when they made a decision, is it like right now or?
Yeah,
Basically.
basically, so what it will mean, probably, And this is legal discussion, but I don't think it's specific to the landlords. I don't think it needs to be in an executive session, or at least I'm comfortable sharing a very general opinion that may be lawyerly caveats of it, may be very wrong. But I think what it means is both in the subject litigation that was before the Supreme Court, which will go back to a trial court level to assess and apply that law to the circumstances, and in future litigation, that when there is a question of interpretation of a statute, that the courts will no longer apply a very high level of deference to an agency's interpretation of that statute. They will, I think, and I'm not that well versed in the actual decision that came down, but there will still be deference to an agency decision, just if you think about it as termed in like an open door. The prior level of deference was basically the courts were closed out, or all but closed out of interpreting the statute by deferring to the agencies. And now the door is more open. It's not all the way open so that the agencies have no interpretive role and the court has no deference to the agencies, but the court has a role. And how that's going to play out will depend on the specific cases. Well, I think that's probably as far as we can really know it.
Can I add to that?
Happy to.
Correct you if it's
Yeah.
inaccurate, just in that. My understanding of Chevron deference, and I was joking that like, we have whole classes in school on administrative procedures, and then like, that poor professor has nothing to teach.
I know, right? Rewriting all the environmental policy textbooks.
But in that, the deference was to agencies to essentially fill gaps in statutes in terms of if there's, here's the legislative intent of this, but to the extent there were any ambiguities or other thing, that deference is to the authorities in a given agency. So I see that in two ways. It's that one is some things now will have to be tightened up at the legislative level, right? Like they're gonna have to write in more. So that is a process we have to see what happens. And then when there is a disagreement in the implementation by administrative staff, it is no longer deferring to that staff interpretation. That opens the door to go to the court to help figure that out. And in that case, we'll have to see, to Christine's point about how this plays out. Does it tend to then have courts on their own kicking it back to legislature to fill in more, or is it courts starting to fill that in themselves? That I think is part of what we have to see.
Can I offer to, and Ed, you can correct me if I'm wrong here. But there's like the Chevron case decision, which impacts federal agencies in Congress. But then there's also how we manage on a state level. And so I think there's a difference in how this case.
But still, there are many federal agencies that.
Oh, absolutely. There's still, yeah, it'll still be a game changer, but with respect to like DNR's role with, our relationship with the legislature or, Ed, this is your area. I'll let you.
You're absolutely right. So it's always hard to remember what I know because I'm a lawyer and what everybody knows because they took civics classes. So, we have a federal system where there's federal rules and regulations and the federal agencies and the state laws and state agencies. And so this is a federal decision that affects the relationship between the federal courts, federal agencies, in the federal, in Congress, and how they operate in the federal executive branch. It does not impact the relationship between state agencies, state courts, the governor's office, and the general assembly. Those are governed by Colorado decisions about deference to various state agencies. It may have a persuasive impact on those types of cases in Colorado, but that's really hard to predict at this point. So it does not change how DNR, ECMC, State Land Board, the State Land Board is really not a regulatory agency, but it does have an implementation and interpretation role in its statute. It doesn't impact our agencies, and it won't have that impact. But again, as Commissioner Heath noted, the intertwining of state and federal is significant, so it'll have those impacts on our relationships with federal agencies.
Yeah, that's where I'm concerned, because I can see so many of our state and local agencies are pass-throughs for true federal policy, federal. So, yeah, that's
More to come.
yes.
It doesn't impact us directly, but it certainly can have impacts as these things are interpreted,
Exactly.
inviting in the judiciary to settle what had previously been at an administration's department level kind of interpretation. Our organization is following this mostly because I have a lot of lawyers on my board, but we do a lot of we do a lot of work at the federal agency level, and it's been really opened a door 40 years of precedent, being looked at very differently.
It's true, but I don't want to go too far and I'm taking up too much time in the meeting, but also remember that there were 60 years, 80 years of federal agency work before the Chevron decision. It has changed and tweaked the relationship of these various governmental entities. It has not completely rewritten the role. So trying to figure out what the new balance is will be an interesting process. But it's not that there's not a new balance. It's not that there's not a balance. It's still out. It's just the balance points are different.
On that note, Kelly, it was great to have you yesterday with us on the tour, fabulous report, really appreciate the updates. A lot of work going on with DNR. Always like your staff going.
Oh, thank you so much for welcoming them. And we're a resource for you, so let us know what you need.
All right, thank you so much. We are going to go on, I am aware, Jared, that our lessee left the room. If you don't mind following up with her. I think that'd be just a nice courtesy. We had a couple of comments that I'm not sure. So we're going to move on to Director Ryan and our business plan goals.
Well, I've got two information items. First one's staff report. And so let me start there on tab 3. I'll hit a couple highlights for you and then as usual, just take your questions about this. As a reminder, only a small minority of the actions that get taken every month come to the board on this agenda. And so I just want to call your attention that there were 95 lease actions that staff approved under the policies where you've delegated that authority. On the fiscal side, the big part of our job is earn money for the beneficiaries. And I think I actually think the 215 number in here is a little bit low. I think Nick's now edging closer to 230. In addition to that, we'll have whatever earnings come from the permanent fund. We're trying to get a beat on that number. They've been a little short-staffed on that. But I think we'll be 270, 275 this year in total revenues generated for beneficiaries. That contrasts with 300 million last year. So a really good year, not quite last year's record, but a really good year. Kelly mentioned some ads to CPW around biodiversity. We also got some FTE approvals to add to our staff, so we'll be spending some time over the next 6 months. Ours are going to be centered more on carbon capture, on regenerative ag and soil health, and on mitigation banking versus invertebrates and pollinators. But wanted you to know we're working on that. A few months ago, we had somebody come and tell us that they had pre-sold 45% of the wetland credits in our wetland mitigation bank. We actually got the money, which is when you really celebrate, is when the wire's clear, right? And so $1.4 million came in. So just kudos to Mindy for that's our biggest payment to date in that program, and is only a portion of what we're going to get out of that specific bank. Neat to see a concept that was really born a decade ago finally coming to fruition. On the field ops side, we had an ag roundtable back in the beginning of June. That's a great opportunity for us to meet with all of our partners in the agriculture industry. It's not just cattlemen. We invite a dozen organizations to that. We share what we're working on. We hear their feedback. It has become a very collaborative thing over the years. We did that back in June and do that twice a year now. It was actually more frequently, and they asked that it be less frequent. So nice when that happens. That must feel like the communication is good and our work is transparent. Finally, not finally, Josie, we wanted to call out for you that there was another successful Youth Corps project. I know you love hearing about that, but they've been a great partner to us. And so we wanted to make sure we highlighted that for you all. And then last thing I wanted to call attention to is last month, I understand you all asked some questions about how that mitigation payment from Excel was going to get used for lesser prairie chicken. And so we responded to that answer with an answer here in the staff report. So hope that comports with what you all expected. And so let me stop talking and just take your questions on all this.
Including more photos.
More photos. Okay. Good. Let me shift then to the next item, tab 4. Sure.
So I think someplace in here we noted that next year, the national meeting for landlords is going to be in Denver.
Yes, it
this
is.
summer, and I wondered if you felt that this would be useful for us to coordinate a meeting with that. I don't know if commissioners have any interest in that, but it seemed like it might be a nice opportunity for us.
I think the way it might be more effective is if we invite you to the sessions. So the way this lays out is there's several days of sessions that are around specific topics that are common to some of the landlords. And so I'm not sure the other 23 states sort of want to come to our meeting, but having you all as commissioners come to individual sessions that are of interest and hear how other states are doing things well or not well. In some cases, it's a pretty open sharing forum. That may be.
They would come, but I just thought for people to come from out of state,
Yeah.
out of state, it might be easier.
We'd love to.
be tacked on before or after.
Mhm. Happy to do that.
I mean, is there any way to attend? I mean, would you expect?
So the governance structures are a little different in the other states. So sometimes they send staff that are relevant to the topics at hand. That's how we've chosen to do it as well. But, you know, in some states, like their landlord is like the governor, the head of the teachers association, and the treasurer or something. So it varies from state to state is the short answer.
I mean, would you all be interested in that or not?
We'll send you the agenda and see how that lays out, and we can involve you however you'd like to be.
I guess the question was, do commissioners go? Like, have you all ever had?
Occasionally. We have never had a commissioner go.
That's.
Oh, really?
Right. Correct. Well, I think the discussions tend to be more operational of sort of like sharing best practices of how we do businesses. I mean,
Yes.
do you all want to correct that? You, almost, a lot of the people sitting behind you have gone before.
Yeah.
Because we do stuff around commercial real estate, you know, or around recreation businesses, or please chime in.
Yes, correct. So I've gone probably the last 10 years, and I would say that for the most part, it's staff. Sort of, you know, anyone from assistant director to deputy director down. Some states are very small, they have 2 or 3 people, and it's maybe an elected commissioner. In those states, we usually have that elected commissioner go. But the states that have land boards, like Idaho this year is hosting it, and their land board is their attorney general, their governor, and their treasurer or secretary of state. The governor will come and give a speech at lunch the first day, but none of the other board members will come. It will be the director of their land.
No, it's not.
Anything else, staff report? Philip? Oh, okay.
Yeah, Phil, please just yell out. Thanks.
So the next information item is, I just wanted to share with you all the business plan goals for the coming year in 24-25. You know, as the memo states, 5 years ago, we approved a strategic plan that contained a lot of big long-term goals for this intergenerational trust. We divided the goals really into 4 big pillars. Financial trusteeship, so the revenue and financial side of all this. Stewardship, how are we taking care of the assets and what are our big goals around that? Organizational excellence, how do we do the best job we can do as an organization and agency? And then communications and outreach. In order to make sure we're making progress every year, we developed the practice of breaking those things down into more quantifiable, measurable goals and trying to see what we could do in the next 12 months to sort of move the entire plan forward. As a reminder, the goals that I'm going to share with you here are complementary and supplementary to just the day-to-day blocking and tackling that we all do as part of our job descriptions, the stuff that's got to get done. So I hope all that makes sense how this stuff layers. We then take these business plan goals, we assign people to be responsible for them, we put their name next to it, we have regular check-ins, and we weave those goals into their performance management plans. So everything you're going to read here has got somebody who's the captain. They may need to build a team to help achieve it, but they are accountable for achieving the goals. From a process perspective, we've tried to do this different ways in different years. This year's process was to go ask each business unit or program to come up to meet as a small group and come up with ideas. They put those ideas into a document that was shared with all staff. Other people could comment on the ideas. Partly that's because sometimes you were creating an idea for somebody else's group. Like, if your group could do this, I could be better, you know, that sort of thing. So we wanted everybody to have an opportunity to comment on that. And then in early June, we had an all staff meeting. We had everybody come together and go through the list and talk about them and sort of figure out what was going to be achievable, what wasn't, where we ought to be expending our energy and not. And so I would like to tell you that I think this is a pretty inclusive process in all staff because they're not just my goals, they're everybody's goals, they're the agency's goals. And we need buy-in from everybody to own these things and get them done. And we've got a lot of really creative entrepreneurial people that provide a lot of interesting ideas and feedback. And so I want to make sure that's got a forum to be heard and worked into the plans here. So before I jump into last year's goals, let me just hit a couple of highlights from this year because they're foundational to understanding how we develop next year's goals. You know, at the end of the day, at the mission level, we've really got 2 jobs, right? We make money for beneficiaries, take care of the assets. And at that foundational level, I'd say we're doing a really good job. You guys are going to get to evaluate me on that later today, but my view is we're doing pretty well at both those things. In the last 2 years, we've earned more than $500 million. 2 years. I mean, let that sink in. That's a lot of money. And I think that's a testament to the way we've thoughtfully grown the organization, grown lines of businesses, tried to find other ways to earn money. We've had a good oil and gas market, but we are trying to diversify our revenue streams. We now have 10 revenue generating programs. That was 4 less than a decade ago. On the stewardship side, I would tell you that stewardship permeates all of our work. We have a lot of tools to guide the management of our lands. We did a whole session on this for you all back in October. We published a stewardship report, but it talks about the wide variety of tools that we use and apply to all of the work we do. It was nice this year that we were recognized by an outside agency for the work we do in this. Our cultural resource preservation work was recognized by History Colorado, and we are committed to continuing to do that. We're actually adding people to further our work around biodiversity, soil health, regenerative ag, those sorts of things that will make us better stewards of our assets for the long term. So I feel like at the big picture level, we're doing pretty well. We're also continuing to invest in our data and GIS and our customer facing systems. We're trying to make sure that we're easy and friendly to do business with, and invest in our people. We put goals in here every year about professional development and trying to grow our own people, build our culture, continue to be a place where people are excited to come work every year. And then lastly, I want to make sure I stay in front of Kelly that, a number of our things that we do every year align pretty closely with the governor's priorities. And while that's not necessarily our mission, it's neat when that can line up, particularly around affordable housing, around renewable energy, in the future around carbon. I think somewhere at the micro level and some of the water work we're doing, Republican River, that sort of stuff. So I just wanted to make sure I highlighted that as well, that those things aren't lost on us. So let's look forward. There's a whole bunch of goals in your package here. The strategic plan is here to help ground you in the work. And then we've got about 10 pages of specific goals, about 80 in total. Some of them build on prior successes. Some of them are entirely new. Some are carryovers of work that gained in progress. We couldn't get it done in 12 months. Let me hit a few highlights. First, in the green section here, we had some incremental success this year in our efforts to grow the trust and make the distribution formulas less volatile. As you all know, House Bill 1448 passed that altered the funding that's required to go to the School Finance Act, instead redirects that to BEST. But at the macro level, what that does is give the treasurer some more flexibility to invest in growth rather than income producing stuff. He was always concerned about hitting a mandatory minimum bogey for school finance. And so I want to build on that. And I think the ways we can do that are to push the Permanent Fund Investment Board through Commissioner Scanlon, who's our representative there, to change the investment policy to achieve more growth. And in fact, that will be the topic of the August PFIB meeting. I don't get to direct their investment policy. That is its own board, but we certainly can help influence that.
To that end, Bill, just to interrupt. It was a while back, we looked at knowing oil and gas revenues are going to decline over time.
Yep.
It would be helpful for the Permanent Fund Investment Board to understand where we think we're going to start netting out in terms of revenue that we're sending to the permanent fund, because I think there's a disconnect between a future we see and the near term kind of, I would say, view of the treasurer's office, and why changing those investment strategies is a priority. I think it's shared by the board, but not with backing of data around, we really are going to have a declining revenue stream. And it's not over a long period of time. It's a relatively short period of time. So we have a proactive approach we should probably take. Just a message.
Said a little bit differently, I think we understand the whole trust.
Yeah.
And they don't. They focus on one wedge of the pie.
That's fair. Yeah.
And I think we try to look at all of the pieces of the trust, the land, the minerals, the revenues that come off of those things and how they impact the permanent fund. And I think helping educate them on that larger pie and how it all works together is,
I don't know.
would be useful.
On this, but I think it'd be a really grounding conversation because.
I will ask the treasurer for permission to present that on the
Yeah.
agenda.
Yes, you can say I suggested it. Just I think it'd be helpful to, it's foundational, I think, to the board's understanding of where they want to go in terms of the investment policy.
Okay.
I mean, irony, it's kind of like that workforce training question. You know, why would I go on and find another source of income because I'm making a lot of money right now?
Right.
Yeah,
Well, we're.
but sort of the opposite of
Money
that.
can be, so, you know, there is.
Yep.
We have some good projections in
Yeah, that's a great.
So both that concept of trying to make the investment policy be a little more tilted toward growth than it is. And this next one of revisiting the best COP issue with the IRS are recommendations that came out of the Permanent Fund Working Group report about 1.5 years ago. I want to continue to advocate for that second concept, the revisit of the IRS discussion around the best COPs. I'd love to have that happen again. I can't lead it. That's got to, the path through that runs through the treasurer's office, but we can advocate for that again more strongly. We could perhaps provide the resources that will require an outside law firm. It's going to require a lot of study by some smart people. But I fundamentally think the facts on the ground are different today than when that discussion occurred 15 years ago, and we ought to revisit that.
Is there a legislative strategy where the legislature could ask for that?
I think the legislature can always direct a department to do something.
Yeah.
So I want to try and make that occur. That is foundational to being able to alter the distribution policy. How the legislature distributes the earnings or the income from the permanent fund to the best program. You all heard Andy Stein in April talk about the volatility and the unpredictability of what we're going to give him each year. It makes it very hard for him to budget. Every other large endowment, I shouldn't say every, most large endowments have a formula that provides a much less volatile revenue stream to the beneficiaries than this does. And we've got to find a way to transition over to that. So I also, for a number of years, have had in the business plan goals, trying to set some asset class allocations that you all help, that helps guide you all in making decisions about things we buy, things we invest in, things we divest of. I really want to get some more traction with that this year. I'd love to see us hire an outside investment consultant to review the assets we have and their returns, and really use that to set some asset class goals that can give you all broader guidance as you make decisions about where we ought to invest NSC dollars or what we ought to do with those. And so I will be coming to you at some point with a request to hire an outside consultant to help us do that.
Well, to that point, I guess one of my, I'm excited that we have new personnel allocations.
Mhm.
We also need to be assured that we have projections that we can pay for these folks.
Sure. Well, and we have an investment and development budget every year and the ability to spend some of our own money on those kinds of. Do you mean the personnel that we're hiring? Yeah. When we go to the legislature to get approval for an FTE, it alters your budget also. So we do know we have that funding source that we've got taken care of. Yes, ma'am.
Seems to me thinking of it, there's two very important exercises happening next year or this coming year. The strategic plan, of course, and then very directly related to it actually is this investment allocation, which I think is. And it occurs to me that hiring a consultant is essential, the right consultant, especially because we have a very unique context.
Mhm.
But there's some substantial pre-work that might be really valuable going into the investment allocation. That being, staff's own projections over, let's say, 10, 20 years. High-low median case, I don't know how to do it, but for like, the commercial real estate portfolio, Chris, I didn't hear when you're going to really analyze it. The same with oil and gas, we've talked about, let's check in on those projections, and also the ag, like climate change scenarios, water scenario, you know. Just going in with our look at the future,
Mhm.
what we think the potential earnings generation is of the assets we own, that will help inform, I think, an asset allocation. And also then layering on those scenarios of if we're successful with the treasurer or another
Mhm.
approach, you know, how that could affect the redirection, sort of almost ending up with a if-then set of
Mhm.
scenarios.
Great, thank you. I'll make a note. Hard to do. There's going to be a wide range from high to low there.
But just even the exercise might prove valuable coming into
Yeah,
an asset allocation because it's such a different.
well, and knowing ourselves a little bit more deeply as we ask somebody from the outside to come in and understand us.
And understanding our collective beliefs
Mhm.
about a future case.
Yep, yep. Let's see, we're gonna need to onboard 5 new people this year, the FTEs that we got. And start to really grow those nascent businesses. You'll see a bunch of goals in here about continuing to improve Atlas, our backbone system. We want to have a single source of data truth for the agency. That's been a whole bunch of disparate systems, 10 years ago, and we've done a better and better job of getting everything into a single trusted system. We're going to continue to build on that work, and also make more customer self-service possible. Bill paying to looking up their own leases, finding data for themselves. So build on the external facing piece of that stuff. You'll see goals in here about investing in our people and our culture, continues to be a hybrid work environment. And we, of course, were a dispersed workplace to begin with 6 offices around the state. And so how do you find ways to continue to keep everybody rowing in the same direction and have sort of an organizational culture? And then finally, as Commissioner Probe just hit on, this is the final year of our current strategic plan. And so we've got to start taking steps to develop the next one and what that looks like and who helps us and leads us through that exercise. And that's where you all are really going to get to weigh in, because that's the big guiding vision document, and it's time to build a new one a year from now. So let me stop talking for a little bit. You all have seen the detailed stuff in here. I don't know if you have comments. You don't have to necessarily. It's an information item, but let me stop.
My only comment is just. It is clear how intentional it is, which is really good. See a lot of strategic plans and the tasks that come out of them that staff still can't follow and they don't really mean anything. So this feels like it was very intentionally co-created and structured in a way that it's workable. So kudos to for that work.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And it's also, just my 2 years here on board, just the ambition that's embedded in this, which I would, for me personally, have a value of rather stretch and fall short than not stretch, right? And there's a lot of things here where you guys have to write them down, you're not gonna get there. But you could, maybe, and it's okay if you don't, and just showing interim progress along the way is important. So I love that, you guys are constantly pushing yourselves to do more.
I actually think it's a little bit of a guiding vision document with game planning inside it. Which is sort of a great way to approach the ongoing work.
Yeah.
You reminded me, I owe the email to Gary King. And I appreciate everything you've done to try and make this change happen with the investment strategy in particular. Including stuff that's outside our control, but we'll keep trying.
Yeah.
So it's a remarkable plan.
Thanks. It's interesting to try and drive an organization with sort of the disconnected governance like this, where, and I've said this before publicly, but the 4 or the 5 of you are responsible for a portion of the assets, but not all of them. The treasurer is responsible for a portion of the assets, and an independent third party makes the distribution decisions and has no idea what's going on with the governance of the assets. Like, that's a really hard thing to run with that sort of a disconnected governance structure.
But to that point, would it be useful, I know we talked about this before, maybe like once every couple of years, that we did something joint with the BEST committee and with somebody from the treasury, just to kind of look at the lay of the land so that we all looking at the same map.
Yeah. As you all know, I've tried to do that with Treasurer Young. We had him come in April and sort of talk about the state of that. Continuing to deepen the understanding of how this side works and impacts that side is I think where the challenge is.
Those kinds of things where people tell us and they tell us what they view, but some kind of interact.
Yeah.
Look at where are we all going and are we all making the same assumptions?
I agree with you. Any other?
I don't know how often, is the best board change frequently, or is the membership on there for certain
They have
terms?
terms.
They all have terms. We put one person on it. The treasurer is the 5th and picks the other 3. So there are 5 total staggered terms. For,
Best.
I'm sorry, were you asking about the best board? I'm sorry, I was answering about the permanent fund board. The best board is its own strange animal created in statute. So there's somebody with a background in like electrical contracting and somebody with it was about the building of the schools, not the larger picture. Having said that, there are some talented people on there who I think understand the bigger picture. And
Often meet with them just so that we're all
Yep.
kind of in the same place.
well, I am presenting to their board in 2 weeks.
Okay.
And they've invited all of the groups that provide funding to them. So they get funding from us, they get some from the lottery, they get some from marijuana. All of us are invited to present to their board in 2 weeks. And so I've actually been working on that slide deck. I've already planned to exceed my allocated time. So, and they've got some good, a couple of good big picture thinkers about this also, that I think we saw this legislative session with House Bill 1448, where we had to work collaboratively with BEST to make sure that the outcome of that bill was what was intended. And so I want to build on those relationships that occurred back in April.
Would it be appropriate to think about that meeting to have a graphic that compares the 10-year vision very visually of oil and gas going down, to the best fund?
Yeah.
The permanent fund, has to, but for, any policy.
I'll send you the slide deck. We've tried to sort of do data visualization there in some slides.
Well, I'm just thinking, is it out of order, but if there's other funding partners in mind, these other partners, how those decisions are made.
Right.
If it looks like ours is dramatically declining,
Right.
there could be a little flashlight shining on some other people on the
Yeah. Let me get with you offline about that, but we've tried to depict what we saw Andy say to us in April, and what, I was going to invite myself to his meeting if he hadn't gone and done it anyway, was, last year he got 150 million in distributions from the land board. 150. For this year, he budgeted 100, and for next year, he budgeted 50. And I was just struck by like, how do you run a program with that kind of volatility to it? And couldn't we work together to come up with a way that you get a more stable distribution stream? And so some of the graphics show the volatility and what he's been getting. I mean, it looks like a sine wave. And so I want them to visually understand the issue and then be willing to talk about solutions that we could collectively advocate for. So I would love your input on it. We've got a slide deck that's 2/3 baked right now, and I'll get it to you. So. Anything else here? We've talked about some of the stuff in the green box, but I'm happy to talk about the yellow, red, and purple if you'd like. If not, I'm also happy to stop talking and get back to the meat of the meeting, the final action items. Awesome.
You're good.
Thanks.
We have, I think, roughly an hour or so to wrap up our agenda. We'll take a 5-minute break. Okay. And then we'll just push through the rest of the agenda. Let's do that. What time is it? Yeah, let's come back in like 5 minutes.
Okay.
All right, thank you all. Did have a brief break. We are back. We're going to move to our final action items to come before the board. Tab A, oil and gas lease auction for August 2024 is our first item. Katie, I see Katie on the screen.
Hello, everyone. Are you seeing the screen?
Then we hear you.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. I have to play with Zoom every time we start it, so. All right. So good morning, commissioners. Katie Stitt, Oil and Gas Leasing Manager, and today I will be presenting the oil and gas lease auction standard list for August 2024. I just wanted to take a brief moment since it's been a while since we've had a supplemental list. And there was a question that had come up about a supplemental list, and I thought I'd just take a minute to explain the difference. The supplemental list exists to bring tracks in front of the board for leasing that our subject matter experts internally or externally have recommended a no lease or a complete no surface occupancy on them. Or if there are special circumstances that staff wants the board to consider when they're considering leasing a tract. The standard list is the tracks that staff and subject matter experts have reviewed and are recommending moving forward with potential leasing, usually with special stipulations included. But the standard list is not like a rubber stamped list. These tracks simply meet the criteria to recommend them for leasing using the normal process outlined by the board's oil and gas development policy. So this is a standard list and there is no supplemental list for this particular auction. So we received only one nomination from industry for this auction. And looking back at previous auction data, generally we've done better at auction when we have more tracks on the list. Smaller auctions have seen generally fewer participants and less interest. And that can impact our bonus generation and ultimately how many leases are issued. So it impacts how much money we make at auction. So knowing this, staff decided to evaluate some tracks that are located near current interest areas and proactively put them on the auction list to see if they generate industry interest. In the past, staff has had relatively good success with this strategy, but we've largely limited those tracks that we've internally nominated to Weld County. And for this particular list, staff looked at other areas of the state that we've seen interest in recently, but haven't had a lot of parcels nominated by industry. So it's going to kind of be a test to see if listing them will generate interest, or if it's better in these areas just to wait for industry to nominate them. So when we looked at tracks for this purpose, we look at a bunch of different things to see if it's appropriate to internally nominate them. So some of the things that we looked at are how close they are to a high priority habitat on the maps, what wildlife species are in the area to determine if that would be a timing factor. In addition to prior leasing history and current and historic production in the area. So I just wanted to note here, I realized early this week that the map included in your packet had a mapping error on it. And I realized this when I was preparing this presentation. So the map I'm showing on the screen is correct. This is the only exhibit that was impacted by this. Exhibit 2, which lists all the special stipulations and the legal descriptions of the tracks, all of that is accurate. This auction list contains 14 tracks, which is approximately 6,500 acres for your consideration today. The tracks are the reddish dots on the map, and they're located in Cheyenne, Kiowa, Los Animas, Lincoln, and Weld counties, which are outlined in blue on the map. The operators in Weld County are actively drilling near the tracks nominated. But in the other counties, Cheyenne, Kiowa, Los Animas, and Lincoln counties, operators have more recently been exploring for helium, which we've kind of talked about in the past. It's an inert, non-toxic gas. It serves critical roles in various industries, including cryogenics, superconductive magnetic cooling. So that's your MRI scanners used in hospitals and clinics. It's used in welding, aviation. Cheyenne County has historic production of helium gas, but recently there have been successful test wells drilled in Los Animas County, and operators are continuing to plan additional wells, some of which are on state trust lands. So to be continued with that saga when those wells get drilled or we get results from them. So these tracks will be offered at the board's standard 20% royalty rate. You may recall when we updated the oil and gas development policy in May, staff mentioned that we had updated the oil and gas lease, and that's the form that will be used for any leases that we may issue from the auction. The auction will open on energynet.com on Thursday, August 8th, and it closes the following Thursday, which is the 15th. As detailed in the cover sheet, the tracks were reviewed per the board's policy, and staff has recommended specific stipulations as outlined on Exhibit 2 to your board packet. Those stipulations addressing staff and CPW concerns that relate to plants and wildlife reflect the current recommendations regarding protections that CPW and other agencies recommend, and they've been reviewed by the board in the past, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have had on any of those stipulations that were in your packet. So no questions. Staff is recommending that the board approve the standard list for auction and lease with the stipulations provided on Exhibit 2. And I'd be happy to answer any questions or any comments. And otherwise, I have provided the text of the board order for your convenience.
Thank you, Katie. I do appreciate the detail in CPW's comments that we are including. I think those are appropriate and address the concerns. I will note we did receive online comment related to this agenda item as well. So thank you for including those. Any discussion from commissioners? I am seeing none. Let us open this to public comment, both in the room and online.
Yeah, folks listening along online, like to make a comment to the board, use the raise hand feature. Seeing no online comment, Terry. Anyone in the room? Matt?
I'll hold my comments, thank you.
All right. With that, we will need, we do have a board order and we will.
This is Commissioner Chavez. I move we approve the oil and gas lease auction for August 2024 as described in the board package.
Thank you, Commissioner Chavez. And a second? Second, Commissioner Clark. We will call a vote. Commissioner Clark.
Aye.
Commissioner Heath,
Aye.
Commissioner Probe,
Aye.
Commissioner Chavez,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes, that passes 5-0. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you, commissioners.
All right, we are next up with item B, policy review, commercial asset management, and Julie. And there's Julie. We can see you.
Great. Good morning, commissioners. It's nice to be with you virtually. This is, for the record, I am Julie Majors and with the real estate section. And I'm here to present the request to reapprove the commercial asset management policy number 600-002. We do not have a PowerPoint for this presentation this morning. The purpose of policy 600-002 is to provide staff guidance for its delegated authority to approve commercial portfolio leases and ground leases. We're not asking for too many changes today. We believe the policy operates pretty well with an acceptable risk for staff's level of approvals. We did make some minor changes to the language, really just tweaked a little bit and added a reference about our commercial broker vendors. The first change clarifies the policy evaluation criteria that it applies to the commercial vertical assets and ground leases, as opposed to, say, an agricultural lease or a solar lease. The second change adds a few more lease evaluation metrics. The third change highlights the fact that the property management solicitation lives in statute as well as the policy, just in case anyone wanted to try to change the policy in the future. And because hiring a third-party broker has not previously been mentioned in the policy, the last change is to create awareness that the third-party broker solicitation can be either sole sourced or solicited, meaning it's not driven by statute like the property management vendor is. So there's flexibility when hiring this vendor. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have regarding the policy or these changes, but we would recommend that the board renew policy 600-002.
We need discussion from commissioners.
Commissioner Probe here. I did have a question. Where in the approval of assignments and subleases, that being slightly different than the lease evaluation criteria defined under scope, wondering how staff sort of approaches those. In terms of, they have a financial impact, namely risk assessment and mitigation, depending on the quality of the tenant or the sublessee.
Sure. So Commissioner Frobe, to answer your question on the commercial space leases, the leases are specific to say that the sublease and assignments are can be reviewed by staff for financial quality. So any tenant that approaches us for a sublease or an assignment has to provide us documentation that the financial risk is equal to or better than the existing tenant's financial capacity. On the ground leases as well, it's a review of if there is a ground lease assignment, typically it's a review of the assignee's financial condition as well, and industries, land use, everything else that we do when we are underwriting the first lease.
Okay, good. Well, I was hoping that was the case. I figured that was the case. The policy isn't so clear. I'm not sure that I have an amendment to offer at this time. And I just wondered for clarification, under the authority, the approval of any lease assignments and subleases, that's with respect to any size. So new leases are limited at 10,000, but lease assignments and subleases could be of any lease.
Yes.
Commissioner, I think this is Christopher Smith, real estate section manager. I think the idea there is that the board theoretically has already approved the risk with the signs and we're under contract now, so.
Just one clarification.
Any other, yes?
I was debating, because I'm like, I hate that my brain works this way, it's not always like socially awesome that I like nitpick to this degree, but I, two questions, one is, under the scope 1B, where it talks about the tenant evaluation, we say suitability of the tenant's industry. I'm assuming that's like suitability with respect to that property and to our mission, but just wondering if there's a couple more words that can be added, suitability of the tenant's industry to. Because otherwise.
I'll defer to Drew.
I'm gonna guess this is like the marijuana tenant we had.
Yeah.
Up in.
That's my guy, it's suitability.
It's gotta be a nod to that,
But I think Julie can answer that question.
Go ahead, Julie.
Yeah, so that's where it started. There may be other situations where we have medical uses that want to come into our office properties, or we have fitness facilities, chiropractic. There's just certain industries that may or may not fit that particular building and that particular tenant mix. So we like to sort of reserve that right.
So would it feel too restrictive if we said suitability of the tenant's industry to the property and our mission, or something that it's?
It could be further defined to the property. I think that's, the point is trying to make sure that the tenant mix works well, and that we don't have a particular tenant, such as the medical marijuana industry, that would impact the majority of the rest of the tenants. So I think it would be fine to say that it's related to the particular property.
Well, I'm gonna counter because I'm
That they
not a
all do
lawyer.
that.
Suitability gives us flexibility to define how we want to define that, because it still could fit a building and we still maybe don't want them.
But that's why I was saying property and mission or something that is, but
And
if we want to just leave it.
Commissioner Carter, I wrote that this is the commercial property policy.
Right.
And so it is, sort of defined in that way.
So it has a bigger view of things. Yeah.
And I understand that as well, so, okay, thank you for indulging that part of the conversation. So the nitpicky part. It's more nitpicky, is just that, under the scope 1, where we see lease evaluation criteria, and it says vertical commercial leases and commercial ground leases. Above that, we say commercial vertical assets. Can that just be flipped and be vertical commercial assets?
Yeah. So I'll defer to Julie again on that.
Just for consistency of
Oh, I see.
that.
To manage its commercial vertical assets,
It's vertical commercial assets.
and you would propose,
Right now it says commercial vertical assets, and I'm just asking if it can be vertical commercial assets, because that's the order of the terms. Right.
Oh.
Yeah.
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 Sure.
Thanks.
Just don't. So those are the same.
Exactly.
I'm not a lawyer and I followed that. Well, okay.
You have a preference in which order?
I like the vertical coming first.
Okay.
Otherwise I would have said.
Just one extra minute.
All right. Any other discussion with commissioners? I think that was all helpful. I will open this to public comment.
Folks listening along online, if you'd like to comment on this item, raise your hand. Virtually. Button click. No hands raised.
Okay, we will need a motion, and I'm wondering, Commissioner Clark, if you want to do a motion with your slight amendment. Sure. What is the for?
I move to approve the commercial asset management 600-002 policy review as presented in our packets with the amendment to the policy that's under authority in the proposed policy, that the term commercial vertical assets be revised to vertical commercial assets.
Second, Commissioner Heath. We will call a vote. Commissioner Clark.
Aye.
Commissioner Heath.
Aye.
Commissioner Pro. Aye. Commissioner Chavez.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, that motion passes 5-0. All right.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you, Julie. Appreciate your time. We're moving right along to C, policy review fiscal impact. We have a live in person there.
All right, good morning, commissioners. Matt LaFontaine, Acquisition Disposition Manager. And I have before you today a triennial review and a reapproval of the board's fiscal impact policy, which is number 200-006. Included in your exhibits is a red line. I think that the changes themselves are fairly minimal, but there's some substance behind it. So I have a little presentation to talk through some of those aspects. The fiscal impact policy was first established in 2016, in part after a recommendation came from a periodic audit that the board instituted a fiscal policy to better address how it looks at these items. But it is a complicated requirement that's both statutory and constitutional. And I'll just walk you through kind of that requirement initially so we can all be on the same page. So I use the statutory language. It essentially mirrors the constitutional requirements, but prior to the lease, sale, or exchange of any lands for commercial, residential, or industrial development, the State Board of Land Commissioners shall determine that the income for the proposed lease, sale, or exchange can reasonably be anticipated to exceed the fiscal impact of such development on local school districts and state funding of education from increased school enrollment associated with such development. And so ultimately, we think that this language exists, and the reason that the board is subject to it is to ensure that the State Land Board does not undertake actions that adversely affect its core mission, which is supporting education. But the language has some vagaries in it that have prodded us into putting a little more structure around it so that we can implement this effectively moving forward. And just to highlight a couple of those items, income is not defined. We talk about sales and leases. Are we talking about sale proceeds? Are we talking about income that's from the reinvestment of those sale proceeds in a recurring manner, whether it's in the permanent fund or another real property assets? Likewise, the fiscal impact is not necessarily directly defined within the statute. And as you kind of pull the yarn and pull the thread on the sweater, you can start getting into second and third order effects pretty quickly. And that just kind of keeps going. So we have historically looked at direct impacts and defined those within our policy as what is caused by our actions on the state trust parcel itself. And particularly relative to a development or a change of use. So you might have some limited tax implications if we're going from, let's say that we were to sell off a parcel of agriculture, and it went from State Land Board non-taxed, but lessee possessory interest taxed assessments to traditional privately owned ad valorem taxes. You're probably going to see a little tax benefit, but you aren't going to see really any negative implication because there's no change of use. There's no significant development on the parcel. That idea, that direct impact idea has been moved within the policy into a more defined definition. And that is this net direct impact metric. So this metric will help facilitate fiscal impact determination. It's defined as the difference between the anticipated increase in local school tax receipts due to development on the trust parcel and the increased operational costs of the local school district. This is data that we can collect through CDE's School View. We can look at current and projected tax mill levies within an area and look at assessed values and so on. So we can actually come up with this determination and see, are we increasing the operational cost burden on the local school district at a higher level than we're going to be increasing the estimated taxes that are going to come in from the development. So then when we have this net direct impact concept in place, or this metric defined, we can apply a simple formula to determine a positive fiscal impact, which is the requirement of the statute. And that formula is whether the monetary benefits, and again, this goes back to income, the definition of income, defined as the reasonably attainable recurring revenues from the reinvestment of sale proceeds or the actual leasing income that's produced if it's a lease for development, exceeds any negative net direct impact. So going back to that previous metric. In some cases, there's no cost burden associated with the development. As an example, a non-residential development isn't going to produce more direct on-site school enrollment costs because there aren't more students. But in some cases, like residential, we will see an increase in the operational costs. And sometimes, if you're looking at instances like affordable housing or something, you might need to be looking at what those offsetting extractions or impacts might be that make up that gap. So that's all comes into place in the analysis. The policy modification proposal also implements a direct requirement for the real estate section to create and maintain a fiscal impact determination worksheet, which will allow for our staff and then ultimately recommendations from our staff to our board to be done in a systematic and common manner as we look across these different development opportunities. And so that's kind of the background, and I think I hit the main points of the actual proposed changes. Our recommendation, of course, staff's recommendation is to implement these, but are there questions I can answer on the proposed changes or?
I think you did a great job.
Trying to clarify.
Sorry, yeah, I agree. When I read it, with the changes you made, it made a lot of sense, so.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Clark. This is really well done, but it's also really comes right on time and gets into a conversation I've wanted to have a little bit. And I almost brought something up during the commissioner talk earlier, but I think it makes sense here, which is just, it is that the positive impact piece that in the affordable housing context in particular, I sometimes fear that we obviously, first and foremost, we are about generating revenue for the benefit of education.
There's a lot going on that side.
And I think it's important that we have a broader view of that in that, yes, if we have the opportunity to, as we hear in a mountain community like this, and we're bringing in, if housing is going on one of our sites, there's the direct fiscal analysis of that. And then there's also that we're helping to provide stability in a community so that there are school kids here to, you know, be a part of a local school, right? Like if the economic churn is such that people can't, you know, multiple generations are no longer living here or having their kids move back or staying here and putting down roots and having a family, then there aren't the same number of school kids. And that is a harm to the, you know, education, public education across our state. So I feel like some of that gets, I mean, there's some room for that here. And I just generally speaking, I think that's my personal view of this, but I think it's an important concept that I just want to have on the table, for this organization. My question is, any chance that this kind of, these revisions to this policy, did you run kind of a property that we have kind of through a model of
So-
how that shows up on the back end of the reform?
Yeah, so for most of our leasing and sale opportunities, this is gonna be a very simple calculation. And it's really, and there's one more item that I didn't mention, but there's an increased definition of notable residential development now within the policy, which would be 3 or more dwelling units. Historically, we've kind of done a fiscal impact analysis as leasing opportunities presented kind of in stride, and they weren't always done in the exact same manner, and they didn't follow the same fiscal impact worksheet systematically. So we have done these in the past, and we've certainly done them for any significant residential development. Our parcel that we sold in Erie, for example, which had both a planned residential and commercial component. Bulk residential land sales that we've pursued but haven't consummated, we've run these for. So we have done it. I guess, suppose the answer to your question, and we do have a mechanism, kind of a methodology in place to implement immediately with that.
One final follow-up to that came up in the response there was, so the 300 dwelling units. So.
Oh, sorry, and then I said 3 for the notable residential development. Yeah, just more, so if someone's building like a single house or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
I heard that, then I was thinking like units versus, you know, bedroom, how many people might be in that household, which could, you know, very different impact. But it feels like within that, it would get captured. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Clark, just, the only thing I would add also is that local land use control, so they're gonna issue the permits and they'll have a referral process. So when somebody comes in and says, I'm gonna build 400 residential units, they send it out to the school district and say, how many more kids are you gonna have? And extract what they need from the development process. So there's sort of a belt and suspenders to this whole thing in my mind anyway. Like, we do a rough calculation on the front end, but at the end of the day, the local community is going to extract what they need from the development to offset the impact that it's going to bring. So.
And I guess, is it fair that I'm looking at this as like, it's still us promoting that we would be putting our land forward for that use of the first place before it's given to that.
Right, so this would occur earlier in the process when the board is asked to provide its approval of a transaction, and not necessarily, and that may or may not ultimately be permitted and go forward for development.
But I think that's an important consideration that we are taking, but yes, in their actual physical building.
Yeah.
That's always going to the school district and get what that impact is, but I think it's useful for us to be doing that ourselves.
This is proactive. And I do see, Commissioner Chavez, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. And I think the sun is baking my brain over here. It's like 118 today. But I guess, and I understand all this, but I think, Bill, you just explained it a little bit better. It's, yeah, if something goes negative, it doesn't fall back on us. It's the permitting agencies that would have to collect the extra revenue. We're just doing this, I don't know, because we have to, I suppose.
Yeah.
I mean, is that correct? I mean, I guess, I don't know. I don't understand this at all, actually.
There was something that caused this to be written way back when, and Ed would probably have to give you the whole history, but I don't want to hear that now. Someday. But again, we're trying to update the policy, and I love the way Matt's tried to give some more definition and some vague terms so that we make sure we're complying.
But short answer, right, is that it's in the Constitution that we do the fiscal impact analysis.
Yep.
We're just clarifying how we're investing that.
Publicly saying this, how we're gonna go about this.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, I understand. Thank you.
Okay, no worries. Any other board discussion? Comments? All right, we will open this up for public comment.
Folks listening along, use your raised hand. No raised hands.
All right, with that, we will need, we do have a board order and we'll need a motion. I move to.
I move to approve, the board order related to policy review for fiscal impact 200-006, as presented in our packets.
Thank you, Commissioner Clark. And is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Chavez. We'll call a vote. Commissioner Clark?
Aye.
Commissioner Heath? Aye. Commissioner Pro? Aye. Commissioner Chavez?
Yes.
And chair votes yes, that passes 5-0. Thank you, appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right, we are moving on to Ben. Our policy review of our solid minerals development. Ben Wollenthal Cashier is here with us, and I have that particular photo tell you.
Thank you.
Yes.
I was joking with Commissioner Clark in the hall that should you desire, you could insert it into my policy that I must wear these at all board
I think
meetings.
it'd be appropriate.
Yes. Solid. It's not currently in there, and is not a proposed edit, just to be clear.
It just, yeah,
Um,
it's a suggestion.
It's a suggestion, yeah. Happy to comply. So, for the record, this is Ben Teschner, Solid Minerals Manager. We are apparently it is policy day. I am here to present the policy review. Yes. Present the policy review for the solid minerals policy 500-002. And a couple notes, I think, before I start is there's a lot of red on this policy. In practice, very little is actually changing. And I will kind of go through why there's so much red and why there's so little change as part of this. But I also thought this was a good opportunity, is particularly in the first half of this presentation, as I've heard from the board that you have had a desire to understand a little bit more about some of the nuts and bolts of how some of our business lines work, that this would be a good opportunity to take maybe an extra 15 minutes and look into the solid minerals program a little bit and talk about how it works. So I may have gotten a little overzealous, including all my lease templates for you in the board packet, but nevertheless, they are there for you to consider should you like them. I want to just start with the objective of the solid minerals program, which is written in policy and in the business plan and the solid minerals business plan. And the effect here is we want to timely and develop our solid minerals and get reasonable returns and ensure that the properties that we lease for solid mineral development are properly stewarded and reclaimed. The solid minerals program is really governed, and as all of our programs are really governed by three things. The business plan, which is the one thing that I did not include in your packet, but is something I presented approximately a year ago when we talked about kind of how this business works. And this is sort of the vision for the business vision for what we want to do with the program. Our contracts, right, which are our direct relationships between the board and our lessees, and then the policy, which is what we're here to talk about today. The goal of the policy is to create the parameters by which staff can operate on our own. And so this is also the things that you say, I really don't need you to come to me every time we need to do X, Y, or Z. Why don't you just take care of that for us? And this enables the board to efficiently manage complex business lines, of which all of our business lines are. This particular policy was first adopted in March 2014, last revised in June 2021. And in truth, that revision, despite having less red, was much more substantial than the revision you'll see today from a practical perspective. And what I'm presenting to you today is our scheduled three-year review of the program. or of the policy. So let's take a kind of a look at the solid minerals program in brief. Greg used to tell me that just please don't start with then the earth cooled. And so I'll do my best to start a little further along than that. But this is our Table Mountain Quarry in Fremont County. And this is one of the products that comes out of the solid minerals program. And these are large boulders that they use for slope stabilization and things like that in civil construction projects. The solid minerals program encompasses a wide variety of commodities. In some ways, it's 10 to 15 different industries all kind of stuffed into a single program. And the thing they have in common is that they are commodities that are mined and usually in a traditional sense. And so we have things as, like the GCC limestone and cement plant on the left, which is our largest non-coal payer into this solid minerals program, all the way down to county gravel pits like the one on the right, which I frequently go inspect and find either no equipment at all there because the pit is dormant, or a single front end loader that is sitting there waiting for somebody from the county to need it. We have energy fuels ranging from legacy coal mines that have been a big business for us in the past, and we all know are moving towards closure in the next few years, to commodities like uranium, where we don't have any production yet, but we're seeing increased interest. And so on the right, you see some rocks that may include some uranium in them, sufficient to justify a mine in the future. We have metals and historic metal mining as well. The picture on the far left is an old shaft, which I want to note is our friends at DRMS have actually put a grate over the top of this as part of their abandoned mines program to help secure this. And I took this photo looking down through the grate, so you can't see the grate, but it is there. We, a few years ago, had active gold production on our lands as well. And we have, the potential to see that revive in the future. Or which one? The one on the far left is in Fremont County. The one in the middle and the right is in Lake County, or was in Lake County. That's no longer producing. But we could see copper or many other things. And then we have this whole new world maybe opening up of what I call the new energy economy minerals. And this is one of our lessees standing in Moffat County, northern Moffat County, on what may be the world's next rare earths mine. We don't know, we'll see. But that's the project he's working on there. And then, of course, when all these minerals are extracted, we then reclaim these properties. And so what you're seeing here is a large reclaimed, used to be a coal pit at the Trapper Mine in neighboring Routt County here as well. So all this falls under the solid minerals program and thus the solid minerals business plan and solid minerals policy. And so I want to point you to a couple of the business plan goals that Bill presented this morning, two of which there are a couple others with my name on them as well, but these two we want to grow this program, particularly the non-coal portion of this program. And we want to be coordinating with DRMS to make sure that the properties that are disturbed get properly reclaimed and moved on to their next beneficial use, whether that's solid minerals or any of the other things that we do in our portfolios. Our current revenue, I think, is important context. Right now, it's approximately 2/3 coal. And this is a graphic from my presentation last year when we talked about the business plan. But our goal is to move this distribution of commodities to look more like this, where coal is probably going to be, in 10 years, maybe a little bit of coal is extracted for some very niche uses, but in all likelihood, this portfolio is going to be much more construction materials, limestone, sand, gravel, stone, and hopefully an expanded metals portfolio, whether that's rare earths gold or the other copper, some of the other things, lithium, some of the other things that people are looking for on our properties right now. So how do we actually manage this? This is a flow chart that Kristen put together, which is, I think, a really useful representation of how our leasing within this program looks. And I want to break this down. There's a couple things here that I want to point out. One is the school in the middle and all the arrows that have bags of dollars going to the school at various points in the process. And I think that's a really important part because we earn revenue all along the way. But I want to break this into two pieces. The first piece that I'm going to talk about is the top half. And this is all the stuff that staff does in advance of us signing a lease. And most of that work is gathering information about the property, gathering information about the lessee's plans, and bringing them to you, and culminates with me sitting in front of you saying, I recommend something. And so let's dive into that a little bit. First, a mining company will come to us and say, I'm interested in a parcel and I'm interested in looking for a particular commodity. And typically, I will send them down the exploration lease path. The exception to that would be if for some reason the commodity is already well understood on a property, we may go directly to a mining lease if we have a lot of reasons to believe that it's already viable. But for the most part, I'm sending our lessees down this exploration lease path, and they are then going and seeking permits from DRMS for exploration work, for drilling, for other activities, sampling, hand sampling on sites, all those sorts of things. Then when we get to the point where we think we have something that's viable or near viable, that's the point then when we start gathering those mine plans, or at least rough outlines of those mine plans, and coming to you and saying, I think we have something here, and I'm recommending that you approve this as a lease. So let's look at the bottom half. And this is actually where I spend most of my time. And this is what happens after you all say, yes, we would like to lease this for a mine. Now we're moving from right to left. So just keep that in mind. We were moving from left to right before. It's sort of a nice circular arrangement here. The green box is where we've actually signed a lease. We've put stipulations in place. And after that, then the lessee goes and begins to finalize their plans, submit their permits to DRMS. But before doing that, they send them to me and make sure and I look at them and say, does this align with our lease? Does this align with our expectations for how other users are going to use this property? Are there ways we can modify this so that everybody can play nicely together and we can get the results we want, not just in the solid minerals program, but with these other uses? Excuse me. And then importantly, it goes to DRMS, and they are the real experts when it comes to the environmental impacts and how those are managed. And there's a bunch of little cycles in there where that information comes back to me. And I work with our lessee to make sure that the things that you're approving are the ones we want. So, and then the last thing is this, eventually this land gets reclaimed and returned to its next beneficial use. All right, let's talk about the policy. This photo is the Pete Lean limestone mine. This is up in Larimer County. And this was taken from a drone. This is actually before I even came, this drone photo was taken. And it's a pretty cool one. All right, so the key elements of what is being proposed to modify this policy, again, in practice, not much is changing. But the big deal here is we're kind of doing a lot of reorganizing. There's a lot of cut and paste that happened to align the structure of this policy with the other business lines that we have that use sort of similar tools. And particularly this idea of a planning and exploration lease and a mining production lease. And the idea is that we are now calling them planning and exploration. Prior, it was called an exploration permit, and it lived in the permits policy. That was a little disjointed and it created some confusion because a permit is something that's issued by DRMS, not by us. We are in the leasing business, not the permitting business. And then we added this term mining and production. So we are now aligned with solar, we're aligned with ecosystem services in using these terms. So when we say planning leases broadly, we're encompassing solid minerals as well. Also inside of here, which is not really changing, our lease management practices are some baseline lease terms and then staff's approval authority, which I'll hit here at the end. Planning and exploration. So that's there should be an R in there. I apologize. Brings authority into the solid minerals policy from the permits policy. The planning name is added to align with other business lines and defines how the parameters under which staff may issue these without coming before the board. And so these again are almost exactly as they have been, with the exception of the option to add a 1-year extension to the term. And that aligns with how the renewable energy program does their work, and has been a useful tool for them in the past, particularly something that says that where staff can say, well, okay, you know, I can issue this 1-year extension, but I need some more information now, or I need additional revenue in order to do that. All of them. Yeah, all of those bullets must be met.
And again, that's a planning
lease.
So nobody's digging a mine here. They're strictly doing the due diligence to determine what's feasible.
Correct. With mine, yes, go ahead.
I stopped there because I wasn't sure where it's gonna be next. I just wondered, for the planning leases. It says that you will review with the stewardship trust manager, makes sense, the appropriate district manager. But I wondered about two things, the other business lines. We just had a situation where can't do solar because of surface minerals.
Yes.
And I just wondered, and there might be other like mitigation bank, there might be other lines of business, so
yes,
that's why they weren't. And two, there must be a reason why we don't reference any external consultation. Somebody's first coming on to the property where we don't know where the mines are, but are we not talking to CPW, understanding sort of.
That's a fantastic question. So this is, in practice, that generally does happen for most of our exploration leases. This is attempting to capture a wide variety of situations. So anytime we have, for example, if someone's interested in uranium, we're going to go through the process right at the beginning, go get CPW, go get, this scenario, this sort of minimum scenario would occur almost always in the situation where a construction company is coming to us and saying, I'm about to put in a bid for, to redo highway, whatever. And the timelines on those are really, really short. So this is the minimum qualifications. And yeah, but this gives me the ability to say to them, okay, I can issue you this exploration lease, so you can then go put that in your bid that says, I have at least have a spot where I'm gonna go get that gravel, or at least likely have a spot, right? They are often saying, hey, can I get this and be out there in 2 weeks doing, looking for gravel on this property. And so without this we think is a nice balance between being able to give them the authority to do that and also checking that we're not running into a major problem that we're about to.
That makes a lot of sense. So I knew there had to be a reason.
Yeah, the other one I'll flag here is the 10 acres. 10 acres is a lot, but that aligns with one DRMS's some permitting breaks that they have in their world. And typically, again, I'm putting in there often less than 1 acre disturbance in the lease or less than 2 acres, depending on what their specific plans are. So. Else on this one?
Thank you.
Yeah, very welcome. Thank you for asking that question. The mining production, since we are now bringing the exploration into the policy, we had to sort of break out mining production more specifically. And so defining these as adding for that production lease to the name, clarifying that all of our production leases have to come before the board. And that staff will take input from all of these, from state land board staff, CPW, county planning offices, and agricultural SE when forming that recommendation that comes before you for a specific lease. It also outlines some minimum financial terms. I view these as good guidelines. In practice, I will always recommend the financial terms that I think a lease can support, and you all have the ability to deviate from those as you see fit. Staff, in the policy, it gives staff the authority to approve advanced minimum royalty relief of up to 50% for a max of 2 years. So this gives staff a little bit of flexibility to work with a lessee if it's taking longer to permit or something like that. And we need to give them a little financial relief on a property that we think is going to go ahead, but is not quite ready yet. It allows staff to issue 10-year extensions if a lease is producing. That's key. If a lease is not producing, then we probably don't want to, especially after the end of its term, we probably don't want it to continue. We want to give it to somebody else. Reclamation only amendments are included here as well. They are amendments that give a lessee, perhaps their term has come to an end, but they still have reclamation obligations. We want to be able to give them access to a property to finish those up. And then other amendments that, quote, do not fundamentally change the substance of a lease. So after all that, staff is recommending that the board approve the updates and modifications to solid minerals leasing policy 500-002.
Any further questions or comments? It's helpful to walk through the whole process.
Thanks.
Get the bigger picture on this.
I have one question. This is Commissioner Chavez. Ben, thank you. This is great. On the gross or on the royalties, how is that? I mean, how does like limestone? I mean, we're just selling. I mean, our customer or lessee is using it immediately into making cement or any of these other. How are these values calculated? Is it just common market or precious metals? Is that selling the ore or actually selling an ounce of gold?
Yeah, great, fantastic question. So this goes into the sort of, we have 14 different business lines stuffed into a business line here. There's really two breaks, and there's two types of production leases that we use. There's what we call the sand and gravel one, and then what we call the locatable minerals one. And sand and gravel and other commodities like that are typically leased on a dollars per ton royalty. And so that limestone, and the reason they're done that way is one, it's simple to do it that way. But two is often these are vertically integrated companies. And so sort of determining a first point of sale is very, very difficult. So we just say it's worth this many dollars per ton. That's what you're going to pay us regardless of what you do with it afterwards. And so limestone is priced that way. And I lean heavily on some industry sources. The Colorado Department of Local Affairs produces reports on, as part of their assessors reports on the leasable values of these things. And I find them to be quite good because when I go right up to that point, people seem happy with it. And when I go above it, I get a lot of screaming and gnashing of teeth by our lessees. So that seems like it seems like good numbers. When it comes to other commodities that are priced on gross sales, a percentage of gross sales, the details really matter. And, we would talk about gold, for example. We would probably do something on the value of the gold based on a commodity price that is published. If it's something else, like some sort of mineral concentrate, we would typically do something on what's called a net smelter return, which is they produce the concentrate and they sell that concentrate to a smelter of some type. And so we would do something based on that. But the details are really tricky because we will need to make sure, we're capturing getting the full value that we want out of those. And especially on the locatable minerals, they're really on a case-by-case basis. And I really need to understand the process and their milling and sales process before and agreeing to those types of royalties.
Thank you.
You. All right, seeing no further comment, Nick will open this to public comment.
Sounds good. Anybody listening along online, if you want to make a comment on this item, please use your raised hand. I have no hands raised.
All right, we do have a board order. If someone would like to put forward a motion.
Madam Chair, I move the adoption of the policy review on the solid minerals development 500-4 as contained in the board package.
Thank you. Second. So, thank you. Commissioner Heath with the motion, Commissioner Cook with the second. We will call a vote. Commissioner Cook. Aye. Commissioner Heath.
Aye.
Commissioner Crowe. Mr. Chavez.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, that passes 5-0.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time. We are moving on to minutes from our Lacey. Board leasing agenda.
It's the only reason
Take the
I'm
role, actually wrote you down.
It's the only reason I'm here, so I want to make sure I get this.
Yes, and that's our packet as well.
Commissioners, good afternoon. And for the record, Assistant Director Nick McKelvey, bringing you July's board leasing agenda for your action. It is a final action item. Just a brief reminder that we present this in the form of a consent agenda because this is items that require board action because of the way we've structured policy on these lines. But they don't necessarily merit a full discussion in an independent action item because they generally don't have characteristics that need discussion or deliberation in some way. So what we presented this month is 3 total transactions, 3 total lease proposals. 2 were based on competitive bid activity, and the one is a new agriculture lease. If it didn't catch your eye, in this case, I do want to point out that on the first competitive bid, we had the second place bidder submitted a significantly generous bid per unit compared to the winning party. In short, staff evaluation found that the characteristics of stewardship and range management were significantly superior. I don't always use qualifying words, but significantly superior by the incumbent and bidder to the transaction. And such that the scoring for stewardship overcame the scoring for the financial component. Over the last several months, you've seen a few opportunities like this where we are going to recommend a stewardship-based winner to a competitive bidding process. And it just reinforces that we are balanced in our mission between fiscal and stewardship concerns. So Wilbur Strickert is listening along online. This is from his district. He would be happy to take questions or comments if anybody would like. I'm assuming so. I think he's still on. But other than that, if there are no questions or comments, happy to entertain a motion.
Just a comment, I think this particular example is actually really important for us and the public to know that we do balance these things. And stewardship really does matter.
And if I could second that and add just that the scoring itself revealed that, right? Like absolutely is, it wasn't further negotiation to get to that. It was, this is what was presented, this is how the scoring came out. And that the scoring allows for that to over.
we've worked hard on the scoring report to make sure that this can happen, that the highest bidder doesn't always win.
And it's credible. So thank you. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? I haven't seen any. Why don't we go ahead and open this to the public for public comment?
Members of the public, if you'd like to weigh in on this item, please raise your hand virtually. No hands being raised.
Okay, with that, we do have a board order and we'll need a motion.
Approve the board leasing agenda for July 2024 as presented in the past.
Second, we have a motion, Commissioner Clark, second Commissioner Pro, we will call a vote. Commissioner Clark? Aye. Commissioner Heath? Aye. Commissioner Pro? Aye. Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, that passes 5-0. Thank you, Nick, for playing the part of Andy so successfully. Now we're to the minutes, which we're looking at. Does anyone have changes or modifications to the June board meeting minutes? I personally did not see any. Without further comment, we will pass those by acclamation. So this concludes the board business for today, but we do have on our agenda an executive session item with Director Ryan, where we get to give annual feedback on his role. And we will do that through a motion, but I'm curious how we want to do that with lunch.
Let's meet at the same time.
We have a little bit of a typing issue with the extra room, so I would suggest breaking for lunch first. And I'm gonna check with them to see if we can get it a little bit earlier. We're a little ahead of schedule.
We're a little ahead, okay,
Yeah.
yes.
So, let me just make sure I understand, the, executive session is going to a different room.
Yes, it'll just be.
And so you all can stay here, eat, break down the room.
But they were a little ahead of our original agenda schedule, so they're finishing something up. I'm gonna check when we can get in there.
Okay.
Okay, given that, Ed, should we go ahead and go into executive session now, knowing we're gonna take a break before it proceeds, just so anyone listening in knows that the meeting has concluded from a public.
I don't think we should go into executive
Okay.
session first.
Okay.
So,
Fair enough.
what I would suggest is, I think take a break for lunch.
Then we'll come back, open
Come
it up.
back, open the meeting, go into.
That's just,
We might
I think-
have that.
What's that?
you all would like to leave.
They would like to clean up. the
Clean
room.
up and get out, and I'm not sure much
Well,
matters.
I don't-
Can't we-
So I think if we have participants on the meeting besides
I didn't see any besides staff.
staff. I think we can just clarify what we're doing here right
Yeah.
now. Which is, what you said, we've concluded all board agenda business with the exception of an executive session that's on the agenda for or for the director's review. We are turning off the public system while we have lunch, and we will reconvene for the board for the executive
But that
session.
motion will be held online.
But yeah,
We can do it in the room, but it won't be online.
It'll be recorded still.
It'll still be recorded.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. Please pack up. I understand that for sure, because it's long go back to them.
Yeah.
Okay, are we comfortable with that? Okay, that's what we're gonna do. Okay,
Christine,
break.
am I
Yeah.
calling in or will I be zooming it or is there a camera?
We'll have to figure out a way to call you into that room, because this equipment won't be part of that meeting.
Well, just text me where I need to call or whatever.
Okay, or send
While
you a
we're
link.
doing that, I want you to practice your cursive writing and.
Exactly.
And sing your scales, that's fine.
Yeah, numbers. Is that accepted?
That's good. I just also want to know, just
Oh,
in
okay,
case.
actually, you can look into your name.
Yeah, you were good to move into.
So
We'll give you like a 15-minute heads up.
I go back to my original assertion, why don't we just call an executive session? And then we will we can now move in our room.
Sure.
And go into executive session, have a working lunch.
Yes, that's what I, that we repeated the thing.
Okay, let us do that. Okay, so with that, Ed, you want to walk us through our motion for an executive session?
Thank you.
Yes.
The next item on the agenda is the review of the director of the state land board annual review. The director has requested that this discussion happen in executive session. I believe that has occurred in writing.
It has.
And therefore, executive session is authorized under 24-6-402-3B1 of the Colorado Revised Statute. So at this time, I would request a motion to go into executive session to discuss the director's review as authorized by statute.
So moved.
All right, Commissioner Chavez.
Second.
Second, Commissioner Clark. Call a quick vote. Commissioner Clark.
Aye.
Commissioner Heath.
Aye.
Commissioner Probe is excused. Commissioner Chavez.
Yes.
And chair votes yes, we will go into executive. Yes, or with
So-
one excuse.
So just to note that it is passed 4-0. You guys will go into a different executive session and we'll terminate this report.
All right, Philip, we're gonna grab lunch and circle right back to you. Okay, thank you.